Now, as you can see, chapter 15 introduces the final series of judgments that are going to come upon the earth. The NIV refers to them as the 7 bowls of God's wrath. If you have the King James Version, it refers to them as trials. I'm sorry, not trials, but vials. Either way, it means the very same thing. God's wrath is getting ready to be poured out upon the earth, which we're going to see in chapter 16. The end result is going to be the fall of Babylon, chapter 17 and 18, and then finally, the return of Jesus Christ, chapter 19. So as you can see, we're getting very close to the end of the book of Revelation. What this is all coming to, the great climax. Now, let's study chapter 15, verse by verse. Look at verse 1. And I saw in heaven another great and marvelous sign. 7 angels with the 7 last plagues, last because with them God's wrath is completed. God's wrath is going to be poured out upon the earth in the form of plagues. Now I want you to underline that word. Underline the word plagues. Plagues is translated from the Greek word plage. In fact, our English word plague is transliterated from this word, and it means the very same thing as the Greek word does. A plague refers to a widespread affliction or calamity. So we know that 7 different calamities or afflictions are going to come upon the earth. These 7 plagues are the last plagues that will ever come upon the earth, with one exception. What is that one exception? Well, Zechariah chapter 14 tells us that during the millennium, every nation is going to be required to travel to Jerusalem to worship the King of Kings. And any nation that doesn't do that won't receive rain. They'll experience a drought, which is considered a plague, a calamity or an affliction that's going to come upon that nation. Turn to Zechariah chapter 14, verses 16 through 19. Notice what it says. In the end. Now, what does he mean, in the end? When the end of this age, when the end of the world comes, the enemies of Jerusalem who survive the plague, the final plague. Now, this isn't the last plague of the 7 plagues. This is really referring to when Jesus Christ comes and He speaks the word. So go back to Zechariah chapter 14 and read the verses before verse number 16. What you're going to find out is that when all of these armies come to the nation of Israel, there's going to be a battle throughout the land. At that point, when Jesus Christ comes, He's just going to speak the word. And what happens is unbelievable. Just go back and read it. But he says, in the end, the enemies of Jerusalem who survived the plague, the final plague, will go up to Jerusalem each year to worship the King, the Lord of heaven's armies, and to celebrate the Festival of Shelters, otherwise known as the Festival of Booths. Any nation in the world that refuses to come to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of heaven's armies, who is that? Jesus Christ, will have no rain. Then he gives an example. If the people of Egypt refuse to attend the festival, the Lord will punish them with the same plague that He sends on the other nations who refuse to go. Egypt and the other nations will all be punished if they don't go to celebrate the Festival of Booths or the Festival of Shelters. But excluding that one exception, these 7 plagues are the last plagues that will ever come upon the earth. Now why? Well, verse number 1 tells us. Look at the last part of verse number 1 in Revelation chapter 15. It says 7 angels with the 7 last plagues. Last, because with them God's wrath is completed. Now, this won't make sense unless you understand what the word completed means. Completed is translated from the Greek word teleo. Teleo means to complete or to fulfill in the sense of achieving a specific goal. If you say that something is completed, teleo, what you mean is that the goal has been achieved. If the goal has not been achieved, then whatever you're talking about is not completed. Teleo. It has not been fulfilled because the goal has not been achieved. Does that make sense? So what this is saying in verse number 1 is that these will be the last plagues to ever come upon the earth because through them the ultimate goal is achieved. Now, what is the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is to usher in the return of Jesus Christ. That's the thing that we're waiting for. In fact, when Jesus had been resurrected, and in those last few days that he spent with his disciples, they wanted to know one thing. And that one thing they wanted to know is, when is your kingdom going to be set upon this earth? And he had to go through and explain to them, wait a minute, there's going to be a period of time known as the church age. But after that, in that 7-year period of tribulation, I will come back and set up my kingdom upon the earth. So the ultimate goal is the return of Jesus Christ. And that's exactly what happens at the end of these 7 plagues. Jesus Christ returns and he sets up his kingdom upon the earth. And once the kingdom of God is set up, there won't be any more plagues, with one exception. As I said, any nation during the millennial kingdom that doesn't travel to Jerusalem every year to worship the king is going to experience drought. But besides that, it will literally be a perfect world when Jesus returns and he sets up his kingdom here upon this earth. There will be no more plagues.